I never used to believe in hauntings, curses, or whatever people call the strange things that happen when the world bends in ways it isn't supposed to. I was the grounded one among my friends, the logical type, the guy who needed proof, who dismissed every creepy noise as old pipes or settling wood, every strange story as exaggeration. That version of me died the night the footsteps started following me home. It began so small, so stupidly insignificant, that I still can't understand how I ignored it. How I decided it was nothing. How I didn't run, or move out, or warn anyone, before it was too late. It started on a Tuesday. I was leaving my late shift, as usual, from the security desk of a small corporate building downtown. Nothing interesting ever happened there. Half my job was staring at grainy monitors while fighting the urge to fall asleep. I clocked out at about 11:15 p.m., same as always, and stepped out into the cold night. The streets were almost empty. A few cars passed by, distant music thumped from a bar down the block, and the wind carried that metallic smell that always comes before rain. Nothing unusual. My walk home was only 12 minutes. I'd taken it hundreds of times. But that night, as I turned onto Pine Street, I heard footsteps behind me. Not loud, not hurried, just steady, matching my pace. At first, I didn't think anything of it. People walk. People go places. That's normal. But the thing is, Pine Street is quiet. It's lined with closed shops and parked cars. At that hour, you might see a stray cat before you'd see another person. Still, I didn't look back. I didn't want to seem paranoid. I kept walking, hands in pockets, head down. Step, 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 step. The footsteps continued. Not closer, not farther. Just there. Behind me, matching me. I slowed slightly. So, did they? I sped up. So, did they? That tiny realization punched the air out of my lungs, and a cold prickle crawled across my skin. I finally turned my head just enough to check the sidewalk behind me. Empty. Nobody. The entire street was dead, but the footsteps didn't stop. I could hear them clear as my own heartbeat, crisp, measured, unhurried. The kind of footsteps a person makes when they know exactly where they're going. I walked faster. Step, 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 step. Still there. I forced myself not to break into a run. I didn't want to be one of those people in horror movies who runs blindly and trips. I kept my pace steady, heart pounding, eyes scanning the reflections in shop windows, trying desperately to spot who was behind me. But all I ever saw was myself. When I finally reached my building, I went straight in, slammed the door behind me, and practically ran up the stairs. I didn't look back out the window. I didn't want to know if the footsteps had followed me onto the property. I didn't sleep well that night. The next evening, I told myself I'd imagined it. Stress. Fatigue. The brain playing tricks. People hear phantom sounds all the time, right? I told myself all of this. But I still left work 5 minutes early, hoping the change in schedule would prevent a repeat of whatever I heard the night before. It didn't. Halfway home, right at the intersection by the corner bakery I always passed, the footsteps returned. Pace for pace. Step for step. Just behind me. I spun around instantly this time. Nothing. No cars. No people. No animals. No echoes from nearby buildings. Just darkness and empty pavement. But the footsteps kept going. This time they didn't stop when I did. They continued for 3 more steps before stopping, as if whoever, or whatever, was making them hadn't realized I'd turned until it was too late. My stomach turned into a knot. Every survival instinct screamed at me to run, but my legs didn't respond. I stood there, frozen, the air around me suddenly colder, heavier. Then, for the first time, the footsteps moved without me. 3 soft steps approaching. I ran. Full sprint. My lungs burned. My legs ached. My chest felt like it was splitting open. But I didn't stop. Not until I reached my building, slammed the door behind me, and collapsed on the stairs. I barely slept. Every creak in the house made me sit up straight. The next morning, I seriously considered quitting my job and moving. But what do you say? Hi, I'd like to move because something invisible is following me at night. Sounds insane.
So I went to work again. And that night, the footsteps waited. Not near the bakery. Not halfway home. They started the second I stepped outside the building. Step, step, step. Slow, deliberate, as if they'd been anticipating me. I couldn't see anyone. No shadows moving. No disturbed leaves. No traces. But the sound was so close now, I could almost feel the vibrations on the ground. I kept walking. The steps followed. Faster, louder, heavier. This time, when I reached my building, the footsteps didn't stop. They followed me right up the walkway. My hands shook violently as I tried to unlock the door. Click. I ran inside. And this time, God help me, I heard them on the other side of the door. One step, then another, then a third, right up to the threshold. Then silence. I stood there for so long, I lost track of time. My fears simmered into numbness. Eventually, I went upstairs, locked myself in my bedroom, and sat awake until dawn. But I made a mistake. I kept working there, kept walking home, kept listening to those things stalking me, step after step, night after night. The more happened, the more the footsteps changed. At first, they were ordinary, like someone in boots. But over time, they became uneven, irregular, almost limping, and louder. Like whatever was following me was growing heavier, or maybe dragging something. And the worst part? I started hearing breathing. Soft at first, then deeper, labored, wet, like something struggling to breathe through a blocked throat. The night that changed everything forever was a Friday. It was raining hard, heavy sheets of water slamming the pavement. The street was foggy, dim, quiet. Every instinct in me screamed stay inside. But I needed the job. I needed the money. So I pulled on my raincoat, stepped outside, and began walking. The moment my foot hit the sidewalk, I felt something was wrong. The air was different, charged, thick, the kind of air you feel before a lightning strike. I stepped forward, and this time, the footsteps didn't wait. They sprinted toward me, fast, violent, pounding the ground like a stampede. I turned, without meaning to, pure adrenaline making the decision for me. And for the first time ever, I saw something. A shape, a tall, dark outline in the rain. Not detailed, not fully visible, just a distortion in the fog, wrong, elongated, hunched, moving toward me unnaturally fast, without swinging its arms, without any rhythm, as if simply appearing closer and closer with each blink. I didn't think, I just ran. I sprinted so hard I nearly slipped twice, but I kept going until my vision blurred and my chest felt like it was tearing apart. I didn't dare look back. I didn't want to see that shape again. When I reached my building and fumbled with the keys, the shape stopped at the end of the walkway. It didn't enter the light. It didn't move closer. It just stood there, motionless in the rain, watching me. I slammed the door and ran upstairs. I didn't sleep that night, not even a minute, because for the first time, the footsteps didn't stop at the door. They entered the building, slowly, one step at a time. It climbed the stairs, stopping outside my door. And there, through the tiny gap at the bottom of the door, I saw a shadow. Huge, deformed, shifting, waiting. I sat against the far wall, too terrified to breathe, clutching my phone like a lifeline. I wanted to call someone, anyone, but what would I say? The shadow stood there for nearly half an hour before it finally turned and left, withdrawing down the hallway with heavy, dragging footsteps. At dawn, I walked out of my apartment, shaking uncontrollably, and packed a bag. I didn't go to work. I didn't call in sick. I didn't grab anything except my wallet, keys, and clothes. I just left. I took a bus to my sister's house 3 towns over. I told her I needed to stay for a few days. She didn't ask questions. I looked too rattled for her pry. I thought leaving the city would help. I was wrong. The first night at her place, I lay awake on her couch, listening to the quiet suburban stillness. No traffic, no bars, no drunks stumbling home, just peaceful silence. Then, at around 2 a.m., I heard it. One step, then another, coming up the walkway. Slow, careful, deliberate. My chest tightened. My heart started racing. I sat up, every muscle trembling. Another step, then another, until the footsteps reached the front door. I held my breath, prayed, begged silently for the sound to go away. Then, God help me, it knocked. 3 slow, heavy knocks. I wanted to scream, to wake everyone, to hide, but I couldn't move. It knocked again, this time harder. Then I heard it, a whisper, not from the door, from right behind me. "Found you." I turned slowly, terrified of what I'd see, but there was nothing there. Nothing but shadows stretching across the living room. But the footsteps started again, inside the house, moving toward me. I cried out, finally snapping out of my paralysis. My sister rushed downstairs, turning on every light, shouting my name. But the sound stopped, just like that. Gone. I tried to explain, between sobs, shaking violently. She didn't believe me. Who would? She stayed with me until I calmed down. But after she went back to bed, I heard breathing behind me again. Wet, raspy, hungry. I didn't sleep for the rest of the night. The next morning, I tried calling a priest, then a psychic, then my old coworker. No one knew what to say. Everyone thought I was cracking under stress. I didn't go back home. I didn't go back to work. I didn't go anywhere alone. But the footsteps followed me everywhere I went. Supermarket, bus stops, hotels, even a crowded mall. Always behind me, always just out of sight, always getting closer. I started imagining what it wanted, why it chose me, how long it had been following, how much worse it would get. Sleep became impossible. My mind deteriorated. My body weakened. Every time I heard a sound behind me, any sound, I jolted like someone had shot me. I don't know what it is. I don't know what it wants. But last night, I learned something that broke me completely. I was sitting on my sister's couch again, refusing to sleep, when suddenly, the footsteps didn't approach me. They moved toward her room, soft at first, then quicker, louder. I jumped up and sprinted toward the stairs, but halfway up, I heard her scream, short, sharp, and cut off instantly. I reached her door and froze. I could see shadows moving under the gap. Long, twisted, unnatural shadows. Then the doorknob turned slowly. I ran. I ran so fast I didn't feel my feet hit the stairs. I grabbed my keys and bolted out the front door, sprinting into the dark street, not stopping even when my lungs burned and my vision blurred. I didn't stop until I reached the edge of town. I don't know where I'm going now. I don't know who to ask for help. I don't know how to make this stop. But the worst part? The footsteps are behind me right now, closer than ever, and I can't tell if they're walking toward me or dragging something behind them. I used to think living on the 9th floor made me safe from anything on the outside, that nothing could touch me up there. Not burglars, not weird neighbors, not the usual dangers people warn you about when you move into the city. But the thing no one warns you about, the thing no one expects, is what happens when something wants you badly enough to climb where it shouldn't be able to stand where no human should ever stand, and knock on your window as if it belongs there. That's exactly what happened to me, and the memory still feels like a bruise on my brain that will never heal. It began on the first week after I moved into my apartment, a level, modern one-bedroom with clean walls, new carpet, and a huge window overlooking the street below. I chose it specifically for the view because I like to write late at night with the blinds open, letting the city lights reflect off my screen. It was peaceful, comforting, familiar. 4 or 5 nights, everything was normal. I stayed awake working late, sometimes until 3 or 4 in the morning, sipping coffee and listening to the quiet hum of traffic far below. But on the 6th night, something changed. I heard knocking. At first, I thought it came from my front door, 3 slow taps, deliberate and heavy, like someone who wasn't in a hurry but wanted me to know they were there. I froze at my desk, confused because it was nearly 2:40 a.m. and I didn't know anyone in the building well enough for a surprise visit. When I finally stood and walked toward the door, every sound seemed amplified. The fridge humming too loudly, the clock ticking like a heartbeat, the soft creak of the floor under my feet. But when I looked through the peephole, no one was there. Just the empty hallway and dim overhead lights. I opened the door anyway, a mistake I'd never make again. But the hallway was silent, still, even more barren than usual. I closed it quickly, locked every lock, and turned back toward my desk, trying to brush it off. Pipes, neighbors, a dream. But as soon as I sat down, I heard knocking again. 3 taps. But this time, the sound didn't come from the front door. It came from the window, the 9th floor window. I didn't want to look. Every instinct screamed not to. But curiosity, fear, disbelief, some twisted combination, forced me to turn. And there, Standing outside my window on the narrow concrete ledge that wasn't even big enough for both my feet was a figure. A man, or something that looked like a man. His face was pale, but not pale like sick or dying. Pale like something carved from cold stone, colorless and smooth, with features so blurred they seemed unfinished, like someone had drawn a face and smudged it before the ink dried. He wore dark clothing soaked by the light, rain drifting down, and his body was angled toward the glass, leaning close enough for me to see fog blooming where his breath hit the pane. I couldn't move, couldn't blink, couldn't understand how this was possible. 9 floors up, no balcony, no fire escape. Yet he stood there as if gravity didn't matter, as if he belonged there, tapping gently with one knuckle, looking directly at me, even though his eyes were too dark, too empty, too wrong to be real. I whispered no, not loudly, just an involuntary reaction, but it felt like the sound carried through the glass because the figure tilted its head, slow as a predator observing prey, and then smiled. Not wide, not cartoonishly, just a small, tight stretch of the mouth that felt practiced, rehearsed, unnatural. I pulled the blinds down so fast the plastic string burned my hand. I backed away until I hit the opposite wall and sat there until dawn, listening for more knocking. When the sun finally came up, I mustered the courage to lift the blinds. The ledge was empty. No footprints, no dirt, no sign anyone had stood there. I told myself I had imagined it. Stress, exhaustion, but deep down I didn't believe it. 4 days after, nothing happened, though I kept the blinds closed at night, unable to look at that window without feeling watched. Life slid back into a shaky routine. Work, home, right, sleep, but I was on edge constantly, jumping at small sounds, flinching at shadows, waiting for something I couldn't explain to return. And then a week later, it did. It began the same way. 3 taps. This time, I didn't pretend it was the front door. I knew exactly what it was. My heart felt like a clenched fist as I reached for the blinds, slowly, hesitantly, praying, begging that the space beyond them would be empty. But when I lifted them, he was there, closer this time. His forehead rested against the glass, skin pressed so tightly I could see faint veins beneath it. His eyes, God, those eyes, they weren't just dark. They were hollow, endless, like looking into a well with no bottom. And he was whispering. I couldn't hear it through the glass, but his lips moved in small, quick motions, repeating something over and over. I stumbled back, knocking into my chair, and the figure suddenly stopped whispering and tapped again. 3 slow knocks, deliberate and steady. I wanted to scream, to run, to call someone, but my voice died in my throat. So I did the only thing I could think to do. I grabbed my phone and dialed 911 with trembling fingers. When the operator answered, I tried explaining that someone was on my 9th floor window, but the more I spoke, the more insane it sounded. Sir, she repeated several times, are you hurt? Has anyone entered your home? I kept saying, he's outside the window. He's standing on the ledge. The operator dispatched police, though I could hear the disbelief in her voice. As I waited, I kept my eyes glued to the figure, terrified that if I looked away even for a second, he would move, or worse, disappear. But he didn't vanish. Not yet. What happened instead was worse. He slowly lifted one hand and placed it flat against the glass, right where my face had been minutes earlier. And the glass, cold, thick, reinforced, began to fog beneath his palm. But not from breath, from heat, from something alive and warm touching it. Except his palm wasn't a palm. Not entirely. It bent wrong. Too long. The fingers stretched too far. The knuckles were slightly misaligned, as if he had more joints than he should. My stomach twisted. I couldn't breathe. And then his smile widened. Not by much, just enough for me to see his teeth. They weren't human. Too uniform. Too thin. Too sharp. Like splinters of bone. I backed away slowly, and the moment my foot hit the corner of the rug, he stopped smiling. His entire expression collapsed into a blank, empty stare, and he leaned forward, pressing his forehead to the glass so hard I thought it might crack. That's how the police found me, standing frozen across the room as 2 officers knocked on my door, shouting for me to open up. When they finally came inside, the figure vanished. Not slowly, not by climbing away, not by turning. One moment he was there. The next, he wasn't. The police searched the area, the building exterior, the rooftop, the windows, everything. They found nothing. They asked if I'd been drinking, if I'd taken medication, if I was under stress. I answered honestly, but my honesty didn't help my case. They left with sympathetic but doubtful expressions, telling me to get some rest. Rest. As if sleep was possible after that. I tried to stay with a friend for a few nights, but I couldn't relax. I kept waiting to hear knocking on their window. Eventually, I returned home. Not because I wanted to, but because I couldn't impose forever, and because some stupid part of me hoped it had been a one-time hallucination. It wasn't. Things escalated slowly at first. Some nights, I'd hear faint tapping, so soft I could pretend it was the wind. Other nights, shadows shifted wrong across the blinds. Once I saw fingers curl over the edge of the window, retreating as soon as I turned on the lights. But the worst part, the truly horrifying part, was realizing he wasn't just coming back. He was learning me, timing me, studying me. He appeared earlier each night, closer, more confident, as though waiting for the perfect moment. One night, around 3 a.m., I woke to silence, so heavy it felt like the air had stopped moving. That silence wasn't right. It wasn't natural. It was loaded, expectant. Watching, I sat up slowly, dread prickling across my skin like static, and I knew without hearing a single sound, that he was there. I didn't even need to lift the blinds. I felt him, his presence like a weight pressing through the glass into my room. When I finally forced myself to peek through a tiny gap in the blinds, my vision blurred with fear. His face was pressed so hard against the glass that his skin warped around the edges of the pane. His eyes were wide open, unblinking, staring straight into mine as if he'd been waiting for me to wake up. His mouth was moving rapidly, shaping words I couldn't hear but instinctively understood. Let me in. I stumbled out of bed, shaking violently, not knowing where to go or what to do. That's when the scratching began. Slow at first, then faster, then frantic, long, sharp nails dragging across the glass as he tried to pry his way in. The sound was unbearable, a high, horrible screech like metal being ripped apart. I covered my ears, curled on the floor, tears burning my eyes. After several endless seconds, the scratching stopped. I held my breath. Slowly, I opened my eyes. He wasn't at the window anymore. The glass was empty. I should have felt relief. I didn't, because I heard something else. Behind me, inside the room, a soft exhale. Warm, close. I didn't want to turn. I didn't want to see, but fear forced me. I spun around, and the room was empty. Completely empty. But the air was warm. Too warm. As if someone had been standing inches behind me, breathing on me, watching me. I didn't sleep at all that night. The next morning, I packed a bag and left the apartment permanently. I didn't care about breaking the lease or losing money. I moved 3 states away to stay with my cousin, someone who wouldn't question my sudden arrival or my pale, sleep-deprived face. For a month, nothing happened. No knocking, no tapping, no whispers, no shadows. I started to believe I'd escaped him, that whatever he was tied to the building, to the place, not to me. I was wrong. 2 nights ago, 4 weeks after I moved, my cousin and I were watching a late movie when something subtle caught my attention. On the TV screen, in the reflection of the living room window behind us, I saw movement. Not on the street, not in the room, on the glass. A pale face, blurred features, a smile stretching too wide. The remote slipped from my hand. My cousin asked if I was okay. I couldn't answer. I walked slowly to the window, heart pounding like a trapped bird, and pressed my palm to the glass. It was cold, empty, nothing outside but darkness. Nothing inside but my own reflection. I let out a shaky breath, and that's when it happened. 3 taps. From the outside. Just 3. Slow, deliberate, certain. I staggered back, horrified. My cousin asked what was wrong. I couldn't speak. I couldn't breathe. I could only stare at the window, praying I had imagined it, until the tapping came again. Louder, and then, faintly, through the glass, I heard a voice. A whisper. Close. Too close. Found you. Now I'm alone in a hotel room, 2 towns over, blinds triple layered, every light on, writing this because I need someone, anyone, to know the truth before he comes again. I can hear footsteps outside my door. Not in the hallway. On the wall. Climbing. Slow. Patient. Getting closer to the window. If he knocks again, I don't think I'll have the strength to ignore it. And I know, God, I know, that if I ever open the blinds when he's there, even for 1 second, he won't just stand on the other side anymore. He'll be inside. He'll be here. And I don't think I'll be the one walking away if that happens. The footsteps just reach the window. I can see the shadow beneath the blinds. He's waiting for me to look. I'm not going to. I'm not. He knocked. 3 times. I think that means he's done waiting. I never believed the forest could take something from you and give something back that only resembled what you lost, but that belief collapsed the night I realized the thing walking behind me wasn't my brother, even though it wore his voice, his face, and his clothes, and even though everyone else insisted it was him. I need to start earlier, before the forest changed everything, back when the 4 of us had decided to take one last camping trip before I left for university. My brother, Adam, was 17, obsessed with photography and weird local legends. My girlfriend at the time, Leah, was the practical one. She hated hiking but loved the quiet. And then there was Marcus, my cousin, who treated every trip like a survival show audition. We picked a remote valley out near the old state forest, a place with hardly any cell service and only one winding dirt road that curled around a lake like a sleeping animal. The forest there is dense, so thick the light looks sickly green even at noon, and the locals have their usual collection of warnings, the kind you hear in old towns. Don't whistle after dark. Don't follow voices into the trees. Don't go out alone after midnight. We all laughed at that. It didn't take long for the forest to prove how stupid we'd been. The first night, everything felt normal. We pitched the tents near the lake, built a fire, and listened to the crickets hum. Adam wandered off to take long exposure shots of the treeline, and I remember joking that he'd get dragged off by some shadow creature if he kept flirting with the darkness. He flipped me off and kept shooting. But around midnight, when the fire was beginning to die, he came back pale. "Did you guys hear that?" he asked. I didn't hear anything except the crackling embers and the faint ripples of the lake. He insisted he heard a woman calling his name, faint, melodic, and coming from somewhere deep among the trees. Marcus joked it was a deer. Leah said it was probably the wind, but Adam didn't laugh. He kept glancing back at the treeline like something out there knew him, wanted him. We shrugged it off and went to sleep. Looking back, that was the moment we should have packed up and left. Something had noticed him that night. Something that didn't intend to let him go. The next morning, Adam was gone. His sleeping bag was empty, his shoes missing, and his camera was lying in the dirt beside the dying fire. Lens cracked right down the center. I immediately panicked. I thought maybe he'd drown in the lake trying to get sunrise shots, but his footprints led away from the water and straight into the forest. He probably went to pee. Marcus said, but everyone knew that was bullshit. The forest at dawn felt wrong. Quiet in a way forests shouldn't be quiet. Not peaceful, hollow, like something was holding its breath, waiting. We shouted for Adam, whistled, clapped, called his name until our throats hurt. Nothing answered. No birds. No insects. No Adam. After an hour of searching, panic gave way to dread. It felt like the forest had closed behind him. Leah suggested calling for help, but we barely had any signal. The tiny bursts of cell reception we managed to catch only lasted seconds. Marcus said we should follow the footprints deeper. I argued we should head back to the car to find a ranger. That's when we heard him, Adam. He called my name from somewhere ahead, somewhere deep in the thick green dark. We froze. It didn't sound like he was in trouble. It sounded like he was waiting. His voice was calm, almost cheerful, echoing strangely, like it came from multiple directions at once. Leah grabbed my arm and whispered, "That doesn't sound right." She was right. It wasn't right. But he kept calling. The forest was so dense you could only see 10 feet ahead before the branches swallowed the light. Eventually, against all better judgment, we followed the voice. The footprints grew erratic the deeper we went. First they were clear, human steps, normal, predictable. Then they shifted, wider, angled like he'd started walking sideways. Then they spread impossibly far apart, as if he'd been running within human stride length. But the forest remained silent, except for the distant sound of Adam calling my name. Not calling for help, calling like he wanted us to join him. We walked for hours. The trees all looked the same. My anxiety grew so thick it felt like an animal sitting on my chest. The air smelled heavy, stale like old leaves and something metallic. Eventually, the trail of footprints ended abruptly at a clearing I swear wasn't on any map. The clearing was a perfect circle, the grass dead and flattened, as if something enormous had sat there for a very long time and only recently moved. That's when Leah screamed. At the opposite side of the clearing, Adam was standing facing a tree, motionless, his back to us, shoulders stiff, unnaturally stiff. We ran toward him, shouting questions, relief flooding through me, until we got closer. His arms hung straight down at his sides, fingers splayed unnaturally wide. His clothes were the same, but something about the shape beneath them felt wrong, like his posture wasn't designed for a human spine. "Adam," I whispered. He didn't turn. I touched his shoulder, cold, too cold, and he slowly rotated his head, not his body, just his head, turning far farther than a neck should. His eyes were wide, pupils huge, as if drowning out the color. He blinked once. "You came?" he whispered in a voice that was almost, but not quite his own. We bolted. We didn't look back. We didn't ask questions. We just ran, branches whipping our legs, lungs burning, hearts slamming against our ribs. The forest seemed to shift around us, paths changing shape, trees rearranging themselves. Adam's voice echoed behind us, but now it was wrong, raspy, stretched, as though several mouths were speaking in unison. "Come back, come back, come back." By some miracle, we stumbled out onto the lakeside near camp. We didn't stop running until we reached the tents. Everything looked normal, the same as we left it, except Adam was standing there waiting. This Adam looked normal, perfectly normal. Same face, same hair, same clothes. He smiled, confused. "Where did you guys go?" he asked. My blood turned to ice. Leah began crying. Marcus backed away slowly like he was staring at a ghost. Adam insisted he'd never left camp. He said he woke up and we were all gone. He said he'd been waiting for hours. And when we tried to explain what we'd seen in the clearing, how we found him standing wrong, how his head rotated, how his voice sounded monstrous, he laughed. He thought we were messing with him, but none of us laughed. We didn't sleep that night. Adam slept fine, though. Too fine. Like something had replaced exhaustion with perfect stillness. I watched him the entire night through the mesh of the tent. He didn't toss, didn't turn, didn't even twitch. He lay perfectly on his back, hands on his chest like a corpse, eyes closed but shifting beneath the lids rapidly. And every so often, he would whisper my name, but his lips never moved. We left at sunrise. I demanded we pack everything immediately and head to the car. Adam seemed annoyed, said we were ruining the trip, but he didn't fight us. He walked behind us the entire hike back, humming a tune I didn't recognize. It sounded like a lullaby, soft and cold. At one point, I whispered to Leah that something was wrong with him. She whispered back, "That is not Adam." Marcus overheard and told us both to shut up. We just needed to get out. But an hour into the hike, Adam stopped following us. When we turned around, he was just standing there staring up into the branches. His mouth hung open, jaw slack. His eyes were rolled up into his skull. Then he snapped back in himself like nothing happened and said, "Why are you all staring at me?" I don't remember most of the hike after that. It blurs together in a haze of fear and trees that all looked identical. When we finally reached the car, Adam walked straight to the passenger seat like nothing was wrong. I insisted Marcus drive because I was shaking too badly. On the way back to town, Adam stared out the window and hummed that same cold, alien lullaby. At some point, Leah reached over and squeezed my hand so tightly it hurt. She leaned close and whispered, "His reflection isn't moving." I glanced into the rearview mirror. She was right. Adam's face stared straight ahead, but the reflection was turned toward Leah, smiling. We dropped Leah off first. She refused to sleep, refused to talk, just ran inside without looking back. Marcus went home next. He didn't say a word the entire ride. Adam, and I drove home last. Mom burst into tears when she saw him. She hugged him like he'd been gone for months. I watched his face. He didn't hug her back, just stared over her shoulder at me with a small, slow smile. "Thank you," he mouthed. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the clearing. The way he stood, the way his head moved, the way his voice echoed. I kept trying to rationalize it. Maybe I hallucinated. Maybe I was exhausted. Maybe fear had twisted my perception. But then the real signs started showing. Adam stopped eating. Food would sit untouched, and when Mom nagged, he'd push it around like he was mimicking human behavior he didn't understand. His skin grew paler. His eyes looked sunken, too dark. At night, I'd hear him walking around the house barefoot, dragging his fingers across the walls. Sometimes I'd hear him whispering to someone in his room, even though he was alone. And the worst part, he never blinked unless someone was watching him. When he thought he was alone, he'd stare at nothing for minutes at a time, eyes wide and unblinking, as though he'd forgotten the basic mechanics of being human. One night, I caught him standing in the hallway, facing the window that overlooked the backyard. I whispered his name. He didn't respond. I stepped closer and realized he was crying, but not normal crying. Thick tears that looked clear and viscous, almost like sap, slid down his cheeks. He turned to me slowly, expression blank. "It's learning," he whispered. I asked him what that meant. He blinked slowly, too slowly, and then walked past me without another word. The next day, the real Adam came back, or at least something that looked far more like him than the thing we'd been living with. I found him sitting at the kitchen table, looking terrified. "Where have I been?" he whispered. His voice was shaking. "I don't remember anything after the forest." I asked him what the last thing he remembered was. He said he remembered hearing his name called by a woman in the woods, following the sound, falling, and waking up just now at the table. He didn't remember the clearing, didn't remember standing wrong, didn't remember the car ride home, didn't remember the week that passed. Nothing. And before I could respond, he grabbed my arm and said, "Did it follow me?" I lied. I told him no. He broke down crying. Real crying, not the sticky imitation tears. He clutched my sleeve like a frightened kid. For a moment, I felt hope. Hope that my real brother was back, that maybe the thing had left and all those nights of dread were over. But then Mom walked in, saw him crying, and asked if he was feeling okay. He wiped his face quickly and forced a smile. His voice softened, his shoulders relaxed, and for a second, I felt so relieved I almost cried myself. But then he turned slightly toward the window. For one fraction of a second, so fast I almost convinced myself I imagined it. His reflection didn't smile. It stared at me with pitch-black eyes. I've been sleeping with my door locked since then. Adam knocks every night at around 3, asking if I'm awake, saying he wants to talk. But it isn't his voice anymore. It's close, almost perfect, but I hear the wrongness, the stretch vowels, the mimicry. Leah won't answer my texts. Marcus won't return my calls. I think it visited them too. I don't know what the forest took that night, or what it gave back, or why it sent the invitation home with us. But I know one thing with absolute, bone-deep certainty. What's in my house right now is not my brother. And it's getting better at pretending. Yesterday, it blinked at the exact right moment. This morning, it ate breakfast without staring at the food first. And tonight, it whispered through my door in a perfect imitation of my brother's old voice, the one before the forest changed him. "I'm back," it said softly, cheerfully. "Let me in. I haven't opened the door. I want to open it. Not tonight, not ever, but sooner or later, it will learn how to pick the lock. And when it does, I won't be writing this anymore. I'll be gone, just another thing the forest took and replaced with something that wears my face."